This is the Puck Poolies podcast with Matt Larkin and Steven Ellis. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Puck Poolies. And this, believe it or not, Steven Ellis, is our 50th episode. Time flies. We've been cranking these out for a year and a half now, and it's been a lot of fun. And as usual, I always want to hear how you're doing with your team. So what's going on now? We're in the home stretch of our fantasy league, Steven.
Well, in my 6-team league, it was another win, but it was not easy. It was against a guy who has had a couple of bad weeks in a row, who I think is dead last. And he just kind of went all out trying to make sure he could beat me, and he could not. So that was a good win. In my 12-team league, though, I lost by the equivalent of one goalie victory. Basically, I had two goalies on my final day. Both of them lost, which kind of hurt me. In both my leagues, I have different goalies setups. One where you get one goalie you could play in a night, and the other is two. I like the one with one because it's harder, but with the one with two, I thought, okay, all I need is one of these goalies to win, and I just beat the team that at the time had not lost a single week this week. I lost by, again, the equivalence of one goalie win, which hurt, but it was a pretty good battle, and at least it made me feel good that I could hold on to the team that championships 3 years in a row, and now it still is the most stacked team. And I, in my first year in this league, could keep up. So, what about you?
I'm in a weird spot in my league. Well, we're in the trade deadline week. Once again, my team won big last week, so it keeps creeping close to accidentally making the playoffs, which is complicated, as I've said. Could be losing a keeper, but now I've been put in an interesting spot where I had one GM come to me with an offer involving Connor Bedard, which is I even decided to crowdsource it on Twitter because I was torn. He wanted Brady Tkachuk. It was Brady Tkachuk and Cole Caulfield for Connor Bedard and Juraj Slavkovsky, which I turned down because this is in our league. We have contracts, so you're getting players are on 3-year deals. So I'm only getting 2 years of Connor Bedard. It's not like it's not dynasty. I'm not getting Connor Bedard and it's turning over for life. So I turned that down. I countered with Tage Thompson and Cole Caulfield. He turned that down. Now, right now we're at, I think it's Tage Thompson, Cole Caulfield for Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli. And he's sitting on that now as we speak. I'm currently pressing him to make a decision because we're at the deadline. So we'll see. That could set me up with quite an interesting arrangement of players for next year. So I don't know. We'll see where we get with that one, but it's been very interesting. And by the way, I've got my league. If you're watching, not listening, my league trophy, I'm in possession of it, which is kind of sacrilege because I'm not the current champion, but I had to pick it up. But I can show it to you. It's pretty sweet.
Ooh, let's see it.
So this is the LAR Canada Hockey League trophy. This trophy, it's really heavy. And the actual guy on top of it, he's in full hockey gear, but he's got a TV remote in it, and he's in a recliner.
That is awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, this is courtesy of Michael Bublé because we said, like, come on, man, you can make a trophy. Like, use your money for good. And he was like, you know what, you're right. So he got this made for us.
So you're just abusing him. You're using him. I see.
Yeah,
that is a nice trophy. I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So it's kind of just teasing me now. Now all of a sudden I'm like, I kind of want to make the playoffs because it's just sitting there beckoning to me. I want to win that thing again. So, okay, well, I digress a little bit. Just wanted to show you that trophy because it's pretty sweet. But let's start helping people win trophies in their leagues and do some pickups, Steven.
All right, let's start off with Sean Monahan.
Okay, so I even wrote in my notes, sigh. I will relent because I was extremely skeptical about Sean Monahan. I was talking about him earlier on the show about someone I'd want to trade away. He's available in 63% of leagues. I'm going to relent for now. I was skeptical about his finishing ability and his health, but I think I should have considered that he was also playing on a bad team in terms of his finishing and getting put in good positions to score. Now, obviously, he's been quite a revelation for the Jets. 8 goals in his first 12 games, playing on that power play 1 unit. He is shooting 27.6% since joining the team. So we know that number is going to come down. But at the same time, at 5-on-5 since joining the Jets, he's actually converting or generating his highest percentage of high danger shot attempts in his entire career on a per 60 basis. So he is getting to more dangerous spots, which is probably a product of just having better players around him. So maybe this is kind of sustainable. I would still sell high if you have him, just because of the injury history. But if he's available in your league, I think it's time to pick him up.
All right. Next up, medium pickup of the week, and it is Shane Pinto of the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, Shane Pinto. This has been an interesting one. He was sort of a forgotten man, had fallen on the depth chart. Of course, the sports betting suspension missed half the year. Available in 75% of leagues. And he was already starting to leapfrog Josh Norris on that depth chart. And that was before Josh Norris went down with an injury that's going to, by all accounts, I think cost him the rest of the season. So now we have Pinto not even in competition anymore, locked into a top 6 role as one of the top 2 centers. And very quietly, 16 points in his last 18 games, getting more than 3 shots a game. So Pinto is really starting to show something. And I think this is someone, I don't want to say league winner, that might be a little too strong, but he's someone who could be a really nice boost for your team in a medium league down the stretch. If he starts, or if he continues, I should say, producing at this roughly point per game rate.
I've been a big Shane Pinto fan since watching him play in junior, before college and everything. A guy that just has a great shot, great offensive instincts, gets to the net, does a lot of great things. Obviously, the start of the year was not the way he wanted, but kind of seeing how he's been able to rebound since returning to the game has been awesome to see. Another guy on Ottawa, really Greg, you should also be looking at him because, man, his underlying numbers, I love it right now. He's doing some good stuff. But we're going to talk about a different rookie instead this time, and it's Tyson Forrester of the Philadelphia Flyers as the deep pickup.
Yes, he's available in 86% of leagues. And sometimes I feel like guys who were drafted in 2020, especially not in the first few picks, kind of get forgotten because it was the COVID year and maybe not as many people were plugged in what was happening. I kind of forget. I'm like, oh yeah, Tyson Forrester was a first-round pick in that 2020 draft. And I think sometimes that's forgotten and it might lead people to write off his hot streak as a fluke, but it's not because he does have that pedigree. He's got 9 goals, or going into Monday, actually, he had 9 goals in his last 9 games, playing in first line, playing top power play unit. He's not going to score a goal per game the rest of the season, but this is someone who is really starting to find his groove at the NHL level. And as the Flyers continue to sort of shift into this semi-rebuild, you never know who else they're going to ship out. I just don't think there's going to be a ton of competition for Forrester to continue to have a really prominent role the rest of the season. And he's also averaging more than a hit per game. So in a banger format, that's a nice little boost as well. So he should be owned in most leagues at this point.
Yeah, when it comes to Forrester, he was someone in his draft year that just had such a confident shot. Like, he knew when he was shooting, there was a good chance of it going in. He was creating his own high danger chances. He wasn't shooting at a high volume, but he was scoring at a high volume, and it seemed like he could score from anywhere. So it's nice to see him kind of translate that over to the NHL because the talent's always there. But you'll also, when you mentioned the 2020 draft, I don't know how much you remember about how long of a draft that was, but I'm pretty sure day 2 took like 11 hours or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Something stupid. There were so many oh, lost internet for this GM. It's like, I hated that day. It was so bad. I remember leaving afterwards and being so mad at how long that took. Mostly because I had to film a video afterwards, and that was painful. At least the in-person drafts are done in a few hours, and everyone can go home. The WTF pickup of the week is someone that actually was very valuable for me in my 12-team league, and that is Dylan Cozens.
Dylan Cozens of the Buffalo Sabres, available in 37% of leagues. And if you look at that season stat line, 14 goals, 38 points, it's definitely disappointing. But that overall line kind of suppresses the fact that he's been much better of late. He's quietly gotten 18 points in his last 20 games, 8 goals included in that line. Centering the top power play unit, he's typically still playing third line center, but he's playing PP1. He's getting his minutes, and he's just back to producing like he did last year over the last 18 games. So if you look at the pedigree, the steady progression he was showing, I feel like this hot streak version of Dylan Cozens is closer to the real him than the cold Dylan Cozens was. So I tend to believe that he's going to stay hot, or at least productive, for the rest of the season. And based on what he gave us in the past, he should be owned in far more leagues than he is at the moment.
All right. So that's the players to pick up. It's time for the tip of the week, which is one I really like, which is beware the hot hand in net. Goaltending, yes. Man, it's just the weirdest thing.
It's weird. And this time of year, we see teams start to get really desperate. They're in those playoff pushes. They're willing to ride a hot hand. If someone gets hot, whatever's working in net, teams might be able to pivot, or willing to pivot very quickly. And that's something you have to stay really on top of if you're a fantasy GM, because if you get caught napping, your starting goalie could suddenly sit for a week if they're riding another goalie. So you have to pay a lot of attention. A good example being the LA Kings. Cam Talbot, first couple months, Vezina Trophy candidate, gets an all-star nod. January, he goes 0-6-2, 868 save percentage. David Riddick emerges, big save Dave, and actually plays more games than Talbot in January. And then in February, Talbot gets hot again, and suddenly Talbot's kind of resting the net back. So if you're not paying attention to that battle, as an example, you could be missing out on a lot of starts. Maybe you should have picked up David Riddick and be ready to stream on nights when Talbot was getting benched because he was on a cold streak or fatigued. So this time of year especially, every goalie start counts. You need to get that volume, so you got to pay a lot of attention. And Daily Faceoff actually can help you with that, the starting goalies page. You got to be on top of it every single day. Don't get caught sleeping. Watch out for those hot hand goalie battles.
Yeah, I will mention, not again to just to plug Daily Face Off, but when it comes to starting goalies, they are often very, very early compared to Yahoo in terms of getting the right players, especially on the weekends. It seems like Yahoo could be pretty late. And I know a bunch of guys that I play with get burned. Like, oh, I thought this guy would be starting, but like it didn't hear until like the very end. It's like, you know what? Most teams will let you know around noon because that's kind of when everyone's done their little media availabilities. So keep an eye on Daily Face Off for that. What's our special segment today?
Yeah, and before we get to the special segment, I should say that I'm a hypocrite because I'm telling people not to get caught napping, but I forgot to note that Pavel Zacha was he was game time decision, and then he played, and I had him still on my bench, and he got 2 goals last night, so that hurt me badly in the game that I need to win. But yes, the special segment this week, Steven, well, the NHL trade deadline, we're recording this podcast Tuesday morning, so we're 3 days away from the deadline. We're about 74 and a half hours away from the trade deadline. So obviously there are fantasy implications when that happens. So we want to highlight a few names that are important to watch because their values could fluctuate depending on what happens. So let's get to it.
All right. And it's funny. A bunch of these names are names we've seen in the trade rumor mill for a few years now. Some of them have been traded. Some of them haven't. But we'll start with one guy who has bounced around a little bit, and that is Max Pacioretty.
Yes, Max Pacioretty of the Washington Capitals. To me, he's a pretty low-risk buy relative to his price tag now. In real life, obviously major injury risk, but his cap hit's $2 million. And if a team retains on that, or if Washington retains, you could get him for $1 million. And the potential upside there is still pretty big. He has 7 points in his last 8 games with 19 shots, and that's in just 14 minutes a night. So extremely efficient. To me, that tells us he can still play. And if he lands in the right situation, I think a team could add him to their top 6. You never know. Like, imagine a scenario in which a team like Edmonton, let's say they strike out on Buchnevich, so they kick the tires on a $1 million Max Pacioretty. What happens then to his value, right? So this is someone you want to watch carefully just based on how much life he's shown lately. And I think he could get a nice boost in value if he goes to a high octane team.
All right. I like that one. Next one up. Vladimir Tarasenko. We did see him traded last year. He's playing in Ottawa now. What's next?
Yeah, I do think we will see him traded. He does have a full no-trade clause, but I think he can still control his destiny if he wants to make a run at a cup. And as it stands right now with the market, we know there are some marquee wingers available. You got Jake Guentzel, Pavel Buchnevich, and now maybe Tyler Toffoli. But in the next tier down, I mentioned Pacioretty. Also, Tarasenko is someone that I expect to change teams, and I expect to go to a cup contender. So most scenarios, based on the environment he's been in Ottawa, which is being ho-hum, I think we're going to see a boost in his value, especially, let's say, if he goes to a team like Colorado. I mentioned Edmonton. Even if he goes back to New York, he's going to land with some better line mates. So I think we could see a small boost in his value depending on where he goes.
Okay. You mentioned the next guy, Pavel Buchnevich. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, this one excites me because even on some middling St. Louis Blues teams, Buchnevich has been roughly a point per game player over the last few seasons. And now we know some powerhouse teams are sniffing around him. So I'm just picturing him. We know that the Edmonton Oilers have been scouting him. Imagine he goes there. He's already a point per game player with Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas. But what if he's out there with McDavid? That's someone who could go off. There could be a stratospheric, truly league-winning situation here if you get Buchnevich traded to a team like Edmonton or Colorado, or whatever it's going to be. So to me, he's an extremely important name to watch. Obviously, Jake Guentzel is too. We'll get to him a bit later in the show, but Buchnevich, you got to pay close attention to where he's going.
So a few of these players, though, sound familiar. Like I think I've read articles about some of these guys on some trade destinations. Do you know what I'm talking about here?
Oh, yes, that's right. You can go to dailyfaceoff.com and click the trade deadline tab in the top right corner of the homepage, and you can find stories on these guys and potential destinations, trade targets board, all that good stuff.
All right, awesome. Next up, Jacob Markstrom. Obviously, the goalie market is quite interesting right now. There's an argument to be made, and I'd be making it to hold on to him. You don't need to trade him right now, but if he is, especially to certain teams like New Jersey, that's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting for Markstrom because he's an example of his value could go up or down depending on what happens, right? So the Flames have been playing decent hockey, maybe overachieving a little bit, but they're also a candidate to keep sending out more pieces. Maybe Noah Hannafin is removed from the equation in the next few days and their defense gets worse, which means a worse environment for Markstrom if he stays. He could get traded to the New Jersey Devils. Of course, that's the team that's been pursuing him hard and almost landed him in a trade, which was reportedly blocked by ownership in New Jersey or in Calgary, I should say. So it's tough. And the other scenario to think about with Jacob Markstrom is the Devils have not been looking so good lately. Are we sure that they're an upgrade in fantasy environment? I would have a few weeks ago said absolutely that would be incredible. But now it's like, geez, if he gets traded to the Devils, they're not playing that well. It might not actually change his fantasy value. I think it would be more changing his value for next year. So it's more, I'd say I'm marking down Markstrom here for keeper leagues, because if he gets traded, he still has term left on his deal. So it could change his outlook for next season. And that's why you want to be paying attention to what happens.
I think he'd help the Devils because the new coach bump. Even though I don't trust Travis Green, given his track record. But then you look at in a lot of cases, just slightly better goaltending would have put this team in a much better position. The issue is, I feel like if they were going to make a goalie trade, it had to have been a few weeks ago now. At this point, they're going to be playing too much catch up, way too late. That's the thing with the trade deadline. It almost feels like it's too late in the season.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at other leagues like NBA is much earlier, I feel like maybe that'd almost be the way to do it. But anyways, next up, Adam Henrique out of Anaheim. Obviously, not a lot of great centermen available on this year's block, but he is one of the names that people are looking at.
That's right. So in real life, Adam Henrique, I think, is going to be a nice acquisition. He's a really smart player. He can kill penalties. He can be in your middle six. He can play center or the wing. But from a fantasy perspective, it's kind of I'm sounding an alarm, because whatever happens to Adam Henrique, it's going to hurt him. I don't see any scenario in which his fantasy value gets better or even stays the same. Based on the teams that are after him, it's a good team getting him. He's currently on the Ducks, so he's playing top line minutes, power play, all that fun stuff as a Duck. He gets traded to a team like the New York Rangers. He's dropping down in the lineup. He's third line center. He's power play too. And I think almost any team that's looking for Adam Henrique is going to play him in a much reduced role. If you're a team trying to trade for Adam Henrique to play on the first line, then don't do it, because I don't think you're making the playoffs if that's your team construction, right? So that's the catch-22. So to me, I'm very concerned. If you're an Adam Henrique owner, I would try to trade him in the next couple days. Oh, what's that? I'm told I am an Adam Henrique owner in my own league, so I should probably try and ship him out. Maybe pause the podcast and start making some offers, because I just picked him up on free agency a few weeks ago, but I'm like, oh, geez, I better trade him, because I just see no scenario in which his fantasy value stays what it is right now.
Okay, I like it. Yeah, with Henrique, NASCAR fan, so that should get some value points there. But just the fact that the competition for centermen right now is kind of weak definitely helps them. That's it for the special segment. We don't have a guest today because we decided to do this ourselves because we're just that cool. But what's the best bet?
Yeah, the best bet of the week, I've been sort of digging around the futures a lot. I just prefer futures bets. I think there's more stability, and I think more that you can control in a futures bet in terms of just a day-to-day bet. Any team can beat any team on any given night, whereas the futures, I think it's more of an educated guess, which is why I tend to lean that way so often with my bets. I'm looking at the Dallas Stars right now, plus 1,000 to win the Stanley Cup. And those odds aren't absolutely amazing. It's still fourth highest, so you're not getting amazing value, but it's tied with six teams total. And I just look at the construction of the Dallas Stars. You already had that star nucleus. You had Jason Robertson, Roope Hintz, Miro Heiskanen, Jake Ottinger. And then you have this emergence of the next wave, Thomas Harley on defense, Wyatt Johnson as your third line center, who can be moved sometimes to the top line on the wing. And now you're adding Chris Tanev to that decor, which really solidifies him. He's one of the best defensive defensemen in the league, was definitely the best defensive defenseman available at the trade deadline. Plus, you have the emergence of Logan Stankoven as the next wave, who could be someone that really helps in the playoffs, given his pitbull-like game, and even Maverick Bourque knocking on the door. So I just look at the construction of Dallas, and now you're relying on guys like Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin just to be your grizzled vets. Even your fourth line has like Craig Smith, Radek Faksa, Sam Steele. That's pretty good for a fourth line. I just think this team looks stacked top to bottom, and I think they have all the ingredients to win the Stanley Cup. So right now, my gut feeling is telling me it's Dallas's year, and that's why I like them as a plus 1,000 bet to go all the way.
I love it. I don't even think they needed to trade for Chris Tanev at this point. I just thought their lineup was that good. You got a goalie the two goalies that can win at any time. You've got an already strong defense core. Logan Stankoven comes in and he's like, hey, you need some extra scoring? I can do that for you. Also, you're going to send me down to the minors every 5 minutes. But this team is just I love it. It's this might finally be the group that, like, when you look a couple years ago when they played in that series against Calgary where Ottinger kind of really made a name for himself, you could tell at that moment it wasn't going to be that long until they were contending for the Stanley Cup. Now I cannot wait until they get swept in the first round just to make us look stupid. But truly though, I feel like these odds are awesome. Yeah, if you want to bet on Dallas.
I'm with you. Yeah, we'll see what happens on Daily Faceoff after the trade deadline. I always do this special analysis called Stanley Cup Ingredients, where I look at all these correlating factors of recent Cup champions, and I put them into a big machine, and it spits out top contenders. Last year, it spat out Dallas and Boston, so it didn't help me that much, but we'll see what happens. Okay, Steven, let's talk about prospects. And I like the name that you've tabled for this week because he's someone who we could see thrust into NHL duty soon if one of the goalies from his parent club gets traded in the coming days. So let's talk Clay Stevenson of the Washington Capitals.
So if you don't know anything about Clay Stevenson, I don't blame you. He was an undrafted goalie signing. Right now, he is 25 years old, so he's an older goalie prospect. But last year, he was playing the ECHL, and he had a pretty solid season, a .916 save percentage with the South Carolina Stingrays. But this year, he's been on the AHL. And, we've been talking so much about Dustin Wolf being the best goalie in the AHL. He finally has his match. It's Clay Stevenson with the Hershey Bears. He's got a .932 save percentage this year, a 1.82 goals against average, and a record of 18-7-2. He's doing so much of that heavy lifting for that team, a team many expect to have a really good playoff run this year. And it seems like they've run through some different goalies in the last couple of years and have had a couple of really good options, but not to the level of what Clay Stevenson's doing right now. The former Dartmouth college goaltender only played one season of college before turning pro. He was a late bloomer. He played as long as possible in the BCHL. Great numbers there in his final season, but nothing too crazy beforehand, and that's why he didn't get drafted. But everything he's done since about 2019 has shown that this goalie does have something. And, if the Capitals do end up trading a goalie, whether it be Charlie Lindgren, whether it be Darcy Kemper, I don't think that's going to happen. This is a guy that's going to go out there and I think really impress people because all he just seems to do is win games and lead his team in situations where they probably shouldn't win. So the numbers are awesome. This is someone who I think should be playing in the NHL sooner rather than later. He did get a contract extension to stick around, so that's key. But we've talked about Pyotr Kochetkov a lot, and the type of guy that who kind of just when he was like really young, when he was 17, 18, he wasn't getting a ton of attention, and he really started to figure it out, and now he's one of the best goalie prospects. I think maybe on a more of a different scale because it took longer for Stevenson, a similar guy that I just think is too good for the AHL and needs those starts, but he's got some other goalies to kind of overcome there. So I like Clay Stevenson. What a find for the Washington Capitals. I've written about him a few times in my prospect roundups, and I probably will keep doing it because he's just playing that well. Like, this guy's just doing some great stuff with Hershey this year. So someone who I do expect to be challenging for an NHL spot next year just because he just keeps winning games, and you kind of just can't stop that. He's really technically sound. He's got the size. He's got everything going for him. I think he's a guy you got to keep watching.
Very interesting. And I agree with you as someone, because in my own league format, like you have goalies from a team, from a franchise, because that's how we sort of stop teams from going crazy with the streaming and churning the waiver wire. So like I had, for much of the season, I just had all the Capitals goalies So I was getting good looks at Clay Stevenson and Hunter Shepard because Lindgren and Kemper kept getting nicked up and hurt. So I was impressed with what I saw when I was taking a closer look at Clay Stevenson and the Capitals. I think Charlie Lindgren is a name that might pop up if a team wants more of an affordable rental coming up to the deadline. So we'll see what happens there. But I know he's been someone who's popped up in some of our reporting in recent weeks. Long shot to get traded, but could. So you'll definitely want to keep a close eye on Clay Stevenson. So, Steven, we got a couple questions coming in this week. Let's see what we have.
All right. The first one comes from Johnny Jackson, who asks, of all the realistic locations for Jake Guentzel, which team would be the best fit for his fantasy value?
Johnny, I really like this question because I think the trade value situation for Jake Guentzel can be deceiving in fantasy because you think, wow, Jake Guentzel, point per game player, he's going to go off. But wait, he plays with Sidney Crosby. He spent his entire career with Sidney Crosby. He's already in an elite fantasy situation. So there are not many scenarios in which Guentzel's value is going to go up. To me, I identify two. If he ends up an Edmonton Oiler, which doesn't seem very likely at the moment, I think they're getting outbid there, or if he ends up part of the Colorado Avalanche. Because then you're playing with all-world, just off-the-charts elite talents. You're playing with McDavid or Draisaitl or Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, whatever it's going to be. But anywhere else, even if it's the Rangers, even if it's Vegas, I think all those scenarios are going to be downgrades from playing with Sidney Crosby. So to me, most likely scenario is going to be a slight downgrade to Guentzel's value. Maybe you're going to get breaking even. If it's someone like Carolina, he's playing with Aho, okay, maybe he'll be about the same. But I only think there are two teams on which Jake Guentzel would find higher fantasy value.
Okay. And the next question comes from Jeremy, and we have to get our daily Kochetkov conversation, I guess, in. And again, just so you know, man, I am a big Kochetkov fan.
I had to just drag you on that one, you know?
I like him a lot. I was a believer of him when he was playing on the KHL, just so you're aware. Jeremy asks, I know you guys like Kochetkov, but do you see his fantasy value suffering once Freddie Anderson comes back?
I think yes and no. So I do think when Anderson's back, the Canes still feel an attachment to Freddie Anderson, and they're still going to give him some rope. He could eat into Kochetkov's workload a little bit. But that said, Carolina, they really want a Stanley Cup, and they've got to go with what's working. They can't just be trying to placate egos. 927 save percentage for Kochetkov in his last 14 appearances. There's just no reason not to keep him as your number one. He's just playing too well. And I think that will take priority over getting Anderson some minutes. So I wouldn't panic too much. And Kochetkov, it's like Spencer Martin was still playing a decent amount. It's not like Kochetkov is this crazy workhorse who's playing nonstop. So I think there'll be enough of a balance. Maybe a slight hit to his volume value, but overall, I don't think it's something I would lose sleep over.
I want to throw one curveball to you, but there's been some Leaf fans that have been kind of suggesting the Leafs should trade Martin Jones and try to capitalize on the fact that the goalie market, teams are looking for goalies, but there might not be a lot available. I'm not crazy for thinking that's really stupid, right?
Yeah, I just don't see Martin Jones as having any trade value whatsoever. And just with the injury history with Joseph Woll, also Ilya Samsonov has a bit of an injury history. I think the Leafs, they made their plan. They want this 3-goalie system. They just want to have that depth. All three of them have had their moments. I don't think the Leafs goaltending has been terrible when you add up the whole thing this year. It's been fine. Not great, but not bad either.
Okay. That's it for that. What are we doing here to wrap this up?
Okay, starting lineup. I just thought with all the attention Mr. Rempe is getting in New York and the big fight with Ryan Reeves, it seems like fisticuffs are on everyone's mind in the NHL these days. So I thought I would challenge you for the starting lineup. Your all-time 6 players that you would want to fight.
Okay, so this one is extremely difficult, but I think I could beat all these guys in a fight. And
by the way, Steven's a pretty big guy. If anyone is just listening, so I think you have a chance here. But continue.
I was in my final years of hockey. I was more of a goon, but I'm going to start off with a guy that I know I could easily beat, Ryan Reeves. He's someone who I could just look at his record this year. It feels like he loses every fight. Yeah, I got to ask him a couple questions yesterday. That guy his arms are bigger than most humans. That dude is just jacked. He is extremely strong, but I beat him just because I probably could. Then I'm going to go with Arbor Jack guy because I would start asking him some Costco related questions. I'd be like, yo, man, like, what are in these hot dogs? Why are they so good? And why are they so cheap? And then I feel like I take him off his guard. And then I know he's a big car guy. So I just ask him about some different Honda Civic engines. And I think from there I could take advantage because he'd be so focused on answering these questions that I could beat him. And that would give me a lot of streak cred. Next one, David Kochi. I don't know if you remember him, but this guy just dropped the gloves with everybody. And I remember reading an issue of the Hockey News that how many more penalty minutes he had than like ice time, and it was awesome. It was like he had like 88 penalty minutes in like 9 games or something like that. So old school goons like that, I know fighting is always a hot topic. I still like it from time to time. There's the fights that are guys who are actually legitimately angry with each other. Those ones are the best. But then I also like it when there are some guys who just have no intentions of playing hockey. And that's what David Kochi did. He was kind of like the movie Goo, my favorite hockey movie. Then I'm going to go with the small guy, hasn't done a lot in the last couple of years, Zdeno Chara. Just to be able to fight the world's biggest hockey player, I think would be awesome. And I could just keep punching his stomach. And I feel like I'd probably win there, and he would just lose his breath from that, and it'd be over. Number 2 here, a guy that everyone wants to fight right now, Matt Rempe. That guy is just smiling the whole time. He's throwing big hits, and I feel like I'm not cool enough. I want to be on the hockey fights, like on their top fights for the week, because I want to be able to say I fought the guy that everyone's talking about on TikTok and Twitter. So if I could do that, I'm probably getting like that $2 million raise because everyone wants me now on the team. And to close it out, I have to go with a guy that I definitely could probably beat in a fight, Nathan Gerbe. Because he's very small, and that'd be my best chance. I maybe have to knee him a little bit. I think, just him being smaller, he can get some good punches and skate around me there. But if I just kind of just blow hard enough or just kind of shove him with 2 hands, I think I could win the fight. So those are my picks.
Those are some very well thought out picks. And the funny thing about starting lineup is there are always multiple ways to interpret. So this is fascinating to me. You went a different direction than I expected. I thought you were going to give me more like guys that piss you off, that you want to fight because they make you angry. But you are clearly tougher than me. You're just choosing guys that you want to fight because they're good at fighting. I definitely wouldn't have gone in that direction because I don't think I would win many fights. My list was going to be number 1, Jordan Binnington. Number 2, Jordan Binnington. Number 3, Jordan Binnington. Number 4, Jordan Binnington. Number 5, Jordan Binnington. And number 6, Jordan Binnington.
I like Jordan Binnington because he's fun.
He drives me crazy. He's the spaz on the ice, poor sport, and sometimes approaches his interviews with a bit of a Bill Belichick type of vibe, which is not my vibe. Hopefully he's not watching or listening, because then I'll have to dodge a water bottle the next time.
Say something good about his fantasy value then.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that was a fun one, and that's it for this week's episode. 50 episodes down, and next week we will be back with a post-trade deadline reaction, because we're theorizing on how values could change, but you're obviously going to want to know what has happened as a result of the deadline. So we will help you there. We'll be back next week with a post-trade deadline fallout edition. Thank you for listening and watching.